Before we dive in, I would like to briefly talk about what I understand the Photoshop to be, because this greatly influences the way that I use the application. I started photography in the days before digital took hold. In those days, most people were shooting on film. So once you shoot your film, you would take it into a darkroom, you would develop the film, and you would end up with negatives that you would print. To print a negative, you would first of all start with a test strip. So test strip was a piece of paper that you expose for different times. So for example, you would expose the whole sheet for 3 seconds, and then you would cover it up with a card, and then you would add another 3-second exposure. And then you move the card a little bit more, and then you add another 3 seconds and another 3 seconds, etc. So when you develop this piece of paper, you would end up with a strip like this that shows you, for example, the exposure or the tones that you will get if you expose your paper for 3 seconds, 6 seconds, 9 seconds, 12 seconds, 15 seconds, etc. So you would look at your contact sheet and think, oh, well, maybe I think that this strip looks the best. So this would be 15 seconds. And then you would take another sheet of paper and then expose it for 15 seconds, the whole sheet, and you would get something like this. Now, this looks good, but because this was taken in the street, I wasn't able to control the light here. So looking at it more critically, I would say, well, this looks good, but this wall looks a little bit too bright, and maybe even the pavement is a little bit too bright. Maybe this could be darker. Maybe this part could be a little bit darker. Maybe this lady's top could be darker, and maybe I can, if I look at her eyes, this eye looks a little bit too dark compared to the other. So maybe I can brighten this as well, etc. So I would usually make a diagram like this, an instruction to myself to remember what I need to do. So I would say, okay, well, next time I print, when I do the next print, I need to give, let's say, 3 seconds more to this area, 3 seconds more to this area, 2 seconds less to the skirt, etc. And then you would hopefully end up with something like this. So you would use there were two main techniques that you would use to achieve this. So one was called burning in, and the other one was called dodging. So burning in was giving more light to the paper to make it darker, and dodging was giving less light to a paper to make it brighter. Now, these techniques were quite difficult, actually, and if you made a mistake, you would waste your time and you would waste your paper and have to start all over again. Now, the way I understand Photoshop is that it allows you to do the same things, but it offers you a much greater level of control and much greater level of precision. So, for example, you have tools in Photoshop like object selection tool, like if you can just draw around something like this skirt, and basically what you are saying to Photoshop, can you try to make a selection? And as you can see, it makes an amazingly precise selection of this area. And now that we have selected something, we can then go and make an adjustment. So we have adjustment layers that allow us to maybe tweak the contrast or tweak the brightness of this skirt. So we have tools that make selections, and then we have adjustments that can tweak the values. Having said that, I don't think of Photoshop as a place where the magic happens. And what I mean by this is, I wouldn't take really bad pictures into Photoshop hoping to make them look great. As a photographer, I would still take great care when taking pictures. So when I go out and take pictures, I want to make sure that my exposures are right. I want to make sure that my focusing's right, that my composition is as good as it can be, so I don't waste too much of the frame later on. Or in other words, I'm trying to have my camera technique as good as possible. So in my opinion, Photoshop is not a replacement for a photographer. It's not a substitute for a photographer. However, if you take care to produce the best images you can and bring them into Photoshop, then Photoshop can become extremely powerful. In the first part of this course, we are going to concentrate on this darkroom concept of, we are going to identify areas that can be tweaked, and then we are going to look at all the different ways that we can make selections of these areas, and then we are going to look at adjustments or the ways of tweaking these parts of the image.